Hey, Wilbur from the Low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Curtis Rogers, who does such amazing work over at 710 Seattle Sports. We're going to be taking a look at the West Coast hoops landscape, a little bit about what we've seen here in the Big Ten, some of these bigger teams falling, and so much more. In the final segment, we've got a small card on this College Basketball Friday, but we do have games, and I'll give you guys picks and analysis on every single one of those 7 games as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Really, the lone question that I got in is what I make out of the gambling scandal that went down. There were 17 different universities, over 30 different players going down, and we also saw some, I believe, Chinese basketball as well, with like the Guangdong Southern team or something like that. So that was very interesting to say the least. And for me, it's like, you pretty much know that it's going to happen at some point, that there's going to be a gambling scandal, as much as you hope that it isn't going to happen. And whenever I bet on a game, I don't think that it's fixed by any stretch of the imagination. Do I know that there's an inherent risk that it might be? Sure, I do. But that said, about 99% of games are on the up and up. They sometimes just have one bad apple. But the biggest thing for me is that there were a few active players that were involved with this, like Kavion Shell. He was over at Delaware State. The biggest one was Simeon Cottle. That's actually your top scorer out there for Kennesaw State. He was legitimately a Player of the Year candidate out there in Conference USA. That's actually a big loss, and that's something that you do need to account for. For me, the rest of it, I really don't care about, because those are games that happened a few years ago. I can't make/lose money on games that happened in 2024. For me, it's all about looking at the guys that are currently in college basketball, that were implicated in this, what their losses do for their team, and for me, it's moving on. I know that there's going to be a lot of other people that have a lot of different takes. There's going to be a whole sweeping thing on, how many games are being fixed and everything like that. I am not focused on that. I am focused on making sure I get the next handicap correct, and that is my focus with this. I don't think that it's as much of a hot take answer as a lot of people would hope, but that's where my mindset is, and my mindset is on trying to make us some money. So let's take a look back at everything that we saw in college basketball on Thursday, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Entering the day, your top covered team in college basketball is Portland State, and I'll try to get you their result from Thursday, as I do have to have this up by midnight Pacific, 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern, and they were playing one of the late games. But how about Mercer now being 13-2 against the spread? They have been a team that's been able to make a whole heck of a lot of money thus far this season, as the SoCon has had quite a few interesting teams, to say the least, including UNC Greensboro having to go to overtime against the Citadel. But Mercer, they get the job done 77-67. They are able to take down VMI, just barely able to get the cover in most places on this one, as VMI does go 14 out of 36 from 3-point, just 3 of 21 for Mercer, but Mercer finds a way to be able to win that rebound battle 50-26, and they also did a solid job going 18 of 24 at the free throw line, while VMI just 3 of 4 at the charity stripe. Florida Atlantic has been a really good cover team for you as well. They moved to 11-4 against the spread, as they absolutely take it to Wichita State. They win that game. They get the cover by a count of 85-67, 90 points in the second half if you took the 151 half under. But that's it for Florida Atlantic. Good games in this one out of Isaiah Elham along with Cannon Carlisle, 18 points apiece, but was a little bit of a hole is greater than some of its parts effort. They played even up with Wichita State in terms of the turnovers and the rebounds, but for Wichita State, only able to go 4 of 15 from 3. Wichita State also went 13 out of 23 at the free throw line. Not necessarily so savory there, but Florida Atlantic did a really nice job knifing the ball inside. They went, if my math serves me correct, 27 out of 38 on their 2-point shots to really be able to go out there, dominate that game. And hey, Florida International has actually been a really good cover team this year as well. Lots of teams out there in the great state of Florida being able to cover, as for Florida Atlantic, they were not in action on Thursday, but if I'm not mistaken, they were in action on Wednesday. They were playing against a Kennesaw State team that had Simeon Cottle for one last game. They are now against the spread 10-4 themselves, so they've been another fun one to be able to take a look at. Tennessee State is now 9-4 against the spread as well. They're out there in the OVC, and they were able to get it done against Morehead State in overtime by a count of 105-100. This turned out to be a non-cover for them, but for Tennessee State, they go 11 of 18 from three, and they have actually been a very lackluster three-point shooting team. Carlos Williams, who is not necessarily the most fleet of foot, goes 4 of 5 from three-point range. Aaron Nabakura was able to supply 30 points, and for Morehead State, credit to them, 29 out of 34 at the free throw line, 9 of 22 from three-point range to be able to hold in there, but those teams have been able to make you some money, and so has Bellarmine. Bellarmine and West Georgia out there in the Atlantic Sun have been two very rock-solid against the spread teams that we did see a lot of Atlantic Sun action on Thursday. West Georgia, they took it on the chin a little bit. That made them now 10-5 against the spread. The Stetson Headers, 95-86 winners, as Stetson, they have been underachieving all season long, but on this day, 12 of 18 from three-point range for Stetson. Stetson loses the rebound battle 33-31. They lose the turnover battle 15-9. But when you're going 12 of 18 from three-point range, and St. Thomas, they're a team that's been a little bit up and down against the spread. They were another team. They went 16 out of 24 from three. If you, like me, had North Dakota catching 10, and North Dakota loses that game by 11, 91-80, yeah, you could just all sit there and say that you were on the wrong side of shooting variance. But the other team out there in the Atlantic Sun that's been able to make you some money, Bellarmine, they lose to Lipscomb. This by a count of 81-71. This was a closing spread, though, of 11-11.5, so they were able to do enough to be able to get you that cover. And right now for Bellarmine, they've been lackluster on defense, outside the top 350 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but doing a solid job in terms of keeping things clean. They won the turnover battle 12-6. They overcome shooting 5 of 26 from three-point range to be able to get you to the window there. So very much yay verily. And Detroit, we'll give a little bit of a shout out here to Detroit. They played a high-scoring game against Northern Kentucky. They're now 9-5-1 against the spread for Detroit. They're unable to pull this one outright, but they were able to do a solid job of helping out with that over, 96-71. This is one where they took it on the chin a little bit. And UW Green Bay out there in the Horizon League as well. They are now 11-6 against the spread, 88-73 winners over Cleveland State. They got down at the half, outscored Cleveland State 51-33 in the second half as they go 15 out of 30 from three-point range, with Preston Rudinger leading the way. He was able to supply 23 points. In terms of some of your lesser cover teams in all of college basketball, Texas Southern continues to be the low water mark at 2-11 against the spread. They were not in action, but in action, Florida Gulf Coast. Florida Gulf Coast has been having very much a less than tremendous year, to say the least, out there in the Atlantic Sun. Currently, they are 4-12 against the spread, and for Florida Gulf Coast, they lose at home to Queens NC by a count of 85-74. Queens NC goes just 9 of 32 from three-point range, but Florida Gulf Coast, they lose this game despite going 22 of 22 at the free throw line, as they went 4 of 21 from three, lose a rebound battle 41-37. So a little bit of a less than tremendous performance out there. UC Santa Barbara has been a team that's been pretty rough against the spread as well. They do advance themselves to now being 5-11 against the spread, though, as they absolutely take it to Cal State Bakersfield, meet the Roadrunners, 75-69 the final. It has been a team that's just been a little bit overvalued all season long. If you took the opening number, you were able to get there with Santa Barbara. There are some places, though, that close this at 6.5-7. So if you took the late number, you did not get there, and I believe that makes them now 4-11 against the spread. If you took the late number, if you took the early number, again, we're able to get there, but certainly they've been a team of intrigue, to say the least. James Madison has been one that just has not been able to cover spreads. They are 4-13 against the spread right now, and just, it feels like this James Madison team has been a little bit rudderless out there in Sunbelt play, as the Sunbelt in general hasn't necessarily had the greatest results in non-conference play. And for Appalachian State, they took it to James Madison 80-65 the final, as for James Madison, defense has just really disintegrated for them. An Appalachian State team that really can't shoot it from three, 13 of 31 from three-point range, and for James Madison, they only induced 6 turnovers in this game as well. So those have been teams that have really been struggling against the spread thus far this season. Southern Indiana is another one. They are 4-9-1 against the spread thus far this season, and they did find themselves in action on Thursday. And for our good friends in Southern Indiana, they were able to get the win over Tennessee Tech 71-54. As we've noticed, Southern Indiana really starting to slow down their tempo. That seems to be yielding much better results than when they were playing too fast for their own good to begin the season. For the top over teams, Denver, they were in action on Wednesday. They're 15 overs, 1 under, and 1 push. They are by far numero uno out there in all of college basketball. But how about what we've been seeing recently out of the Elon Phoenix, who are currently 12 overs to 4 unders thus far this season? For Elon, they played another over against Northeastern. That was a closing total. A lot of places more around about a 161, 161.5. So just get there by a wisp And for Northeastern, they do get the win by a count of 85-78, despite Elon going 13 of 27 from 3. The kryptonite for Elon is that they're really not a great defensive team, and Elon lost the turnover battle 18-11, so that was a little bit costly, as you also had in this game William Kamori for Northeastern go very much off in this game, 31 points, 7-12 from 3-point. And Northeastern has been a pretty rock-solid over team thus far this season as well. I mentioned Cleveland State, they're 11 overs to 5 unders thus far this season. Another team that has been catching you quite a few overs. We're going to be seeing them in action on Friday. Providence, they've been 12 overs to 5 unders, so very intrigued to see what you get there. And then Santa Clara, 12 overs, 6 unders, and a push. They've been a team that has really been having themselves some intriguing results out there in WCC play. I don't think I was able to brush up on their late Wednesday result, but they were able to net you a nice cover against Pacific, 85-69. That was a game that was able to go over that closing total as well, so they've been one that has been able to help you out on that front. If you're looking at top under teams in all of college basketball, Cincinnati's right now 3 overs to 14 under, so they have been number 1. But out there in the WAC, UT Arlington has been playing some slogs, and they played another one on Thursday, 56-52. They do get the outright win against Utah Tech. This was one where the spread was right around a pick'em, so it should have been able to get there with UT Arlington as well, but they have been a top 5 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Utah Tech 1 of 15 from 3-point range, and for our good friends in UT Arlington, they were very fortunate in this game because Utah Tech, they lose by 4 and they go 9 of 18 at the free throw line. Do the math as to how big that was. You did see Gonzaga as the lone ranked team be able to get a win and cover against Washington State, 86-65 the final. This was a spread of about 21-21.5, and for Washington State, they did a pretty solid job being able to knock down their threes. They go 13 of 28 from 3, but if you took the points with Washington State, and I admittedly did, 10 of 20 at the free throw line. Even if they had just went like 13 out of 20 at the free throw line, that would have been good enough for a cover, so less than amazing there. Right now, Braden Huff out for Gonzaga. We'll talk a little bit more Gonzaga and Washington basketball with our good friend Curtis Rogers as he's based out there in Seattle in the next segment, but Graham Ike, 23 points, 11 rebounds, very rock solid performance out of him, and even though Gonzaga didn't necessarily have their fastball, 6 of 16 from 3-point range, they do win the turnover battle 17-8, and that's been ailing Washington State for a very, very long time, so for Gonzaga, they get a nice quality cover out there. A team that has been very solid to the under thus far this season as well. How about what we've been seeing out of Cal Baptist? 6 overs to 13 unders. They were looking like they were going to be playing a very overwhelming game on Thursday in the first half, but they completely shut it down in the second half. Cal Baptist gets up 46-29 at the half against Abilene Christian. 57 points in the second half is able to keep this one under for Cal Baptist. They get the job done 74-58. The final is Cal Baptist 6 of 14 from 3-point range. Abilene Christian just 3 of 10 from the outside, but Cal Baptist, one of your better rebound rate teams in all of college basketball, 42-28. They were able to win that battle. Southern Indiana, I just mentioned them. They're 5 overs to 10 unders thus far this season, so they've been a little bit more of an underwhelming team as well. And getting back to Portland State, because I mentioned that they had entered the night, you're top against the spread team in all of college basketball. They just barely find a way to be able to get the job done and eat this one out against Northern Colorado. They win this game by a count of 76-73, and if you took the overnight number, that was hovering right around about 1 to 1.5. You were able to get there. Closing number was about 2.5 to 3, so some of you might have gotten a push, some of you might have been able to get a cover, but Portland State, in terms of a lot of closing numbers, they're now 11-1 against the spread, in some places 11-1-1 against the spread, so they've been highly profitable for you out there. And if you're just taking a look at the landscape of college basketball right now, we've got ourselves some very, very intriguing, shall we say, results over the last 7 days, as we have been seeing things getting a little bit more overwhelming here in the last 7 days in college basketball, as the over hitting at darn near 55%, 180 overs, 148 unders, and a few pushes along the way, and favorites against the spread are just getting destroyed. Underdogs in the last 7 days, 186 and 142 against the spread. That's a 56.7% hit rate to the underdogs, and if you're looking at the season as a whole, underdogs are hitting at darn near 51%, 1,490 and 1,437 against the spread, and the over rate is 50.2%, 1,470 overs, 1,458 under. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's where we're all getting trend-wise. Coming next, how about if we head out to the great state of Washington and chat with our good friend Curtis Rogers of 710 Seattle Sports, right here on Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN family podcast. Always great to be joined by this man as we've got Curtis Rogers aboard. He does such tremendous work over at 710 Seattle Sports. If it's based out there in the Pacific West, he's probably covering it, whether that be the Seattle Seahawks, who obviously they've got a little bit of a big game here coming up this weekend, whether that be the Seattle Crieghton, all things college basketball. He does a tremendous job on so many different fronts. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at A Kid From Kent altogether. And Curtis, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Greg, always happy to be on with you. And yeah, we're starting conference play here. Every team is just a couple of games into it. It's been a very exciting start as well. Lots of great teams, especially at the top of the AP Top 25. I'm super excited for this portion of the college basketball calendar because we're going to start to see some separation coming up here between the haves and the have-nots. And this is the time of year where you got to really make some hay in conference play because you don't have those non-conference games to pad your resume anymore.
No, sir, not at all. And we have seen over the last week or two, some of the top teams in college basketball have some struggles. Vanderbilt takes their first loss of the season. Michigan, they fall to Wisconsin. You saw Iowa State get it handed to them against Kansas as well. What do you make out of what we thought were the most dominant teams in college basketball, all of a sudden having some struggles? And even a team like Arizona, they got pushed by their interstate rival in Arizona State about 24 to 48 hours ago as well.
Yeah, that ASU team pushing Arizona to the most uncomfortable I think Arizona has been this season.
Aside
really
from maybe UConn, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, aside from that UConn game, and that was a true road game too, so big ups to the Sun Devils for really staying in there against Arizona. But I think it just kind of points to how tough it is to navigate your way through conference play. I mean, these are your most familiar opponents. These are the teams that are gunning for you night in and night out in conference play, and it's hard to win on the road in conference play. It's hard to win multiple games against certain opponents. So, yeah, I think this is absolutely a time of the year where those teams that have really kind of coasted, I think, in non-conference play, you're starting to see a lot more challenges. And look, there are teams that are playing with a bit of desperation. I think that was the case for ASU on Wednesday night. You know, they're a team that absolutely needs some Q1 wins in order to get to the NCAA tournament, or else they're going to be sitting at home in March. Playing with that desperation against Arizona, I think that was an interesting look. But like you said, Iowa State, you know, getting their doors blown off by Kansas, a Kansas team that I think we all know has the talent to compete with some of the best teams in the country. They just haven't really been able to put it all together to this point in the season. But Vandy getting knocked off, and then they've got a tough test coming up on Saturday against number 19 Florida, a Florida team that had, I think, some pretty big expectations coming into the year. Haven't lived up to them yet, but still a formidable opponent for that Vanderbilt team. So a lot of these teams that, you know, I think everybody kind of thought were maybe a team that was worth watching. Obviously, it's still worth watching, teams like Iowa State and whatnot, but they're going to have a tougher time of it once conference play really, really gets here.
And how much do you think it's a residual of last year as well, that we were spoiled by having such dominant teams like Duke, Auburn, Florida, and this year we thought maybe Michigan, Iowa State, they were all going to be those teams. And as of right now, Arizona does not have a loss, and I think a lot of people would be interested to know, neither does Miami of Ohio and Nebraska. So those are certainly teams to be taking a look at. But how much do you think that maybe we were all thinking back to last year and maybe overrating these teams, for lack of a better term, a little bit more because of what we saw from the previous year?
Yeah, I think there is something to that, especially I think a team like Florida where they returned a lot of guys from that team a year ago, and then they pick up Boogie Flynn, they pick up Xavier Lee, a lot of preseason expectations of them just potentially running it back for another national championship. One team that I think has delivered on the expectations that they've had, I think Arizona's exceeded expectations because you look at what they were in the AP Top 25. I believe they opened the season ranked like 13th in the country, if I'm not mistaken. So they've definitely played above where everybody thought they were going to be. But UConn is a team that they've really just kind of stayed the course outside of that loss to Arizona. They haven't lost a game this year, and now they're entering conference play in the Big East. As we know, it is not a conference that is going to be putting up much of a fight against the Huskies. So I think they're going to have a really easy go of it for the most part. And I think they're almost as big of a lock for a 1 seed as you could possibly be. Obviously, Arizona being undefeated and whatnot, they're definitely in the running for a 1 seed and the number 1 overall seed. But obviously, the Big 12, as we know, is going to be just a murderer's row with Iowa State, with Houston, with Kansas. It doesn't get easy for Arizona, especially once they get deeper and deeper into conference play. They get a pretty easy start to it. They play UCF on Saturday, but UCF is 14-2, so it's not like they're chopped liver. They've got a home game against West Virginia as well. I know Kirk Kriisa makes his return to McHale Center as a member of the Cincinnati Bearcats. Yeah, in a couple of weeks, so that'll be a fun one to watch as well. But I think last year, those teams that met in the Final Four, it was very chalky, but also like you couldn't argue that anybody got left out of the Final Four that wasn't one of the best teams in the country. Like those 4 teams that met last year for the Final Four, they're absolutely the very best. This year, I mean, Arizona, Michigan, UConn, and Iowa State seem to be, in my mind, the 4 best teams. And I think when I look at those teams and how they can get to the Final Four, I think the team that I believe in the most to get to the Final Four out of that group is probably UConn, just based off of Dan Hurley's recent resume, him being able to have so much success in March. I mean, you look at the 2 national championships that he's got; they blew out every team in both years. So UConn to me is the one that I think I have the most belief in to get back to a Final Four. Arizona is incredibly deep. I look at them and I say, I don't know what it's going to take to beat them. I know obviously ASU was able to come as close as anybody this year, but even then, at one point in the second half, Arizona just kind of put their foot on the gas and they were like, all right, this game is going to be decided. Like, we're going to pull out so far ahead that even though ASU got it to within a 1-possession game at one point in the final 2 minutes, it still wasn't enough. Arizona came out victorious. So I think UConn is a team I believe in the most to get to a Final Four, probably followed by Arizona, and then also Michigan. I mean, Dusty May has been to a Final Four with FAU. Yeah, I think those 4 teams right now, Greg, and those are the ones that I say I would not be surprised at all if they make it to a Final Four.
Yep, absolutely. And there's one team that you left out, and they were the only ranked team that was in action on Thursday, and that'd be Gonzaga, as we do have our good friend Curtis Rogers. He does such tremendous work over at 710 Seattle Sports, joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and we are doing this as Gonzaga is right now taking it to Washington State because, well, obviously I have to have this podcast up by midnight Pacific, and as of right now, Gonzaga is currently up 21 points, but I mean, just what do you make out of this Zags team? One where it did feel like perhaps they were a little bit undervalued coming into the year. They're another one of those teams that I sort of put in that tier 2 where they lost to one of those dominant teams in Michigan, Iowa State, UConn, you could throw in there, as well as Arizona, and right now for Gonzaga, other than that game against Michigan, and they had a few close calls. They had that close call against San Diego. They got pushed to overtime against Seattle, but they're certainly looking like one of the most mighty and one of the most deep teams in college basketball as well.
They are, and they're going to really need that depth, especially over the next month or so. Braden Huff looks like he's going to be missing at least 4 weeks with an injury. And he's been arguably their best player this year. That Gonzaga team is really deep, though. I would expect Ty and Grant Foster to get more minutes. I would expect, just seeing more guys in that rotation with the absence of Braden Huff. But I think this Gonzaga team is built to at least withstand that kind of injury, at least in the regular season. I am circling that game, though, that they've got Saturday night in Seattle against Seattle U. That Climate Pledge Arena, that's where Seattle U plays all their big games. So obviously Gonzaga is going to pack the place out. But if you recall, Greg, just a couple of weeks ago, Seattle U nearly went into the kennel, a place where hardly anybody wins, and they pushed Gonzaga to the absolute brink. That game had to go to overtime. Seattle U had a very late lead in that game, and this Seattle U team has not been afraid of anybody this season. They've been a really fun ball club to watch. Yeah, they're 12-6 right now, but I think if there is an upset to be had this weekend, Greg, that's one that I'm looking at. I'm saying the Redhawks are going to be really motivated. It would be interesting because Seattle U will have beaten every Division I team in the state of Washington in this season if they are able to knock off Gonzaga. They've already beat Washington. They've already beaten Washington State. They've already beaten Eastern Washington. So the state championship is on the line on Saturday for Seattle U if they're able to get a win over Gonzaga. And I think Chris Victor's doing a heck of a job for the Redhawks this year. I don't know if they're going to get to the NCAA tournament, but they're definitely a very competitive bunch in their first year in the WCC.
Oh, they certainly are, and they have the award for most players that have tried to block a shot with their shoe this year as well. If you go back to that game against Washington, they didn't ever post that video on YouTube, and it's just such a shame because that was probably one of the most hilarious moments I've ever seen on a basketball court in my life. Braden Maldonado trying to block a shot with his shoe, but you know what? For Seattle, they've been blocking a lot of teams from being able to get wins, so that's certainly going to be one to watch, to say the least. And I think without question, we've got ourselves some great depth in college basketball, and just who are some of the teams that you look at as perhaps those tier 2 teams that we have yet to talk about that you do think have a little bit of fight and could be able to make a little bit of noise? Because it felt like last year, we just alluded to it, it was pretty cut and dry as to the teams that were going to be able to make the Final Four. This year, it feels like if you're inside the top 15, you've got a little bit more of a chance. Yeah, maybe Arizona's not going to be going down before the Final Four. Even with the loss, I still have faith in Iowa State, but it still feels like there's a spot or two to be up for grabs, and there's going to be at least one region where I think there's going to be a lot of chaos in the NCAA tournament.
One team that is kind of lurking right now, Greg, that I think opened eyes this week is the Stanford Cardinal. Now, they're not ranked right now, but they're 14-4, picked up a win over number 14 UNC on Wednesday, and then they have a game against Duke on Saturday at Maples Pavilion. They have been getting just phenomenal contributions this year from Ibuka Corey, a year he has had, the freshman averaging 23 points a game. Those are numbers that you're going to see him taken in the first round of the NBA draft, and I think it's just another testament to what Kyle Smith has done. And I think Kyle Smith is one of the most underrated coaches in all of college basketball. I think if Stanford's able to pick up a win on Saturday against Duke, now this is a Duke team that is getting better and better as the weeks go by, but I think Stanford right now, Greg, could very much play themselves into the NCAA tournament if they're able to get this win against Duke. They have another game against a ranked opponent coming up on February 4th against Clemson, but I'm looking at Stanford right now, Greg. It kind of reminds me of Kyle Smith's Cougs team, Washington State Cougs team from a couple of years ago, where they did get off to a good start and they were kind of like, oh, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, man, this is actually a really good team. So I think if you're looking to get in on the ground floor of a team that is maybe on the outside of the top 25, I think the Stanford Cardinal right now, Greg, are a team that I'm looking at and saying, okay, they have got my attention.
Yep, absolutely. They did have that one game against Notre Dame where, wow, that took college basketball back to the dark ages. But past that, they have been very rock solid this year. To your point, Nerd Ball with Kyle Smith, it is back. It is out there in full force, and I'm loving what I'm seeing there. And are there just a few games this weekend that are going to be catching your attention? Because we've got on Saturday just a big giant slate. Sunday is going to be a little bit down, but I mean, even on Friday, that Baylor versus Kansas game, I'm very curious to see how Kansas responds off of that win against Iowa State. And I think that we've got a lot of great basketball that we're going to be getting the next few days.
Oh, yeah. BYU, Texas Tech on Saturday, yes. Arkansas, Georgia. It's going to be a lot of fun. How about Utah State and Grand Canyon as well out here on the West? Grand Canyon, one of the great home field or one of the great home court advantages in all of college basketball. And Utah State, just steady as she goes, 15-1 to start the season. Ho-hum start for them. That's just how they do it every single year. How about Tennessee and Kentucky as well? I think Tennessee had much higher hopes coming into this season. And Kentucky right now, they are just kind of slogging along here with 6 losses. It is go time right now for Kentucky if they want to get a high seed in the NCAA tournament. They did just sneak by LSU to pick up their 11th win of the season. But I would imagine Mark Pope is starting to feel maybe a little bit of pressure. Maybe the temperature's rising a little bit on that hot seat. Another team that is in desperate need of a win, I look at Washington. They did pick up a nice win earlier in the week against Ohio State at home. Michigan came into their building a couple of nights ago. Washington unable to get the upset victory there, losing 82-72. This is a key stretch for the Huskies, especially playing as many good teams in a row as they've got. It was starting with that Michigan game. I believe they've got, it was number 2 Michigan, it is number 15 Michigan State, and then they go to Nebraska, undefeated Nebraska on the 21st. Then they've got a game against number 13 Illinois on the 29th. So this is a brutal stretch for them. They've got to pick up some wins against these Q1 opponents, or else I don't know if the NCAA tournament is going to be in their future this year. So this is a very important stretch for them if they want to make it back to the NCAA tournament for the first time in about a decade.
Oh, it is going to be a very interesting stretch. We've got a lot of great games that are going to be going down this weekend, and there's a lot of great action that's happening out there in your neck of the woods, Curtis, and you're doing a great job of being able to take a look at it all, whether it's out there in Washington, whether it's just within the Big Ten, within the Mountain West, even the Big Sky. I know that you do some work with Eastern Washington as well, and so much more. So we'll have the good people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, it's gearing up to be a great college basketball season, great finish to the college basketball season up here in the Pacific Northwest. Tap in on seattlesports.com, our YouTube page, Seattle Sports. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at A Kid from Ken, offering up my college basketball observations and also just having a blast watching this great game that you and I love, that so many of us love, because this time of year, Greg, it's time to go indoors, and it's time to go indoors at arenas because it's so cold outside. So it's a perfect time to get into some college basketball action, especially as college football is winding down. How insane is it? A decade ago, if somebody had told you Nebraska would be undefeated in basketball and Indiana would be undefeated in football, it'd be crazy to talk about. But here we are. What a beautiful sport this is. I enjoyed talking with you a bunch, and I can't wait to talk with you again later on this year.
Absolutely. It's the I'm the captain now meme for a lot of these different programs. It's been wild and crazy, to say the least, what we've been getting there. And trust me, I know about things getting cold. I spent 22 years in the great state of Wisconsin, so you don't have to tell me twice to stay indoors here in the month of January and stay warm. And things are always hot and things are always great when we've got Curtis aboard. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights and did so once again today. So a big thanks to Curtis for joining me here right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday as we hit some make shots. And we're back here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Curtis Rogers, who does such great work over at 710 Seattle Sports, looking at a little bit of everything out there in the Pacific Northwest. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights and did so once again today. So a big thanks to Curtis for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday as we hit some make shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gnut_D1. No games on the extra games board, as we only have 7 games, so it makes it very easy to be able to go in order because we're just going to be going in time order today. So how about if we get things started? This is 881, 882. Crieghton is going to be on the road against Providence. Providence between a 1.5 point favorite to a 1.5 point underdog. 162.5 to 163.5 is the total. It's at a total of a 166. I like the over. You do have a Crieghton team that slowed down quite a bit. Currently, they're outside the top 240 in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you've got a Providence team that's gunning it. They're in the top 10 in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Providence has not been great on defense. Currently 251st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but top 45 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now, the guy that I really like for this Crieghton team is Austin Schwartz. He, ever since that that game against Nebraska, I think that was like 9 or 10 games ago, has been averaging 15 plus points per contest. Overall for the season, 11.5 points per game, shoots 42% from three, but this is still a little bit of a sketchy Crieghton team that in a road/neutral venue is outside the top 200 in terms of points per possession, but their games involve a lot of clean possessions. Crieghton top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball, outside the top 325 in terms of generating turnovers. Now Crieghton is not going to put you on the free throw line, top 15 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis, and they encourage their opponents to pile drive the ball down low. Opponents' 2-point shooting percentage is in the top 25 in all of college basketball, but you do have a Providence team that I think is going to do a relatively good job in this ordeal. Now for Crieghton, it's a whole greater than some of its parts approach with regards to scoring. Josh Dix, about 12 points per contest, 3 assists. Jason Green has been able to chip in there 10 points. Blake Harper, Isaac Trout, 9 points per contest, so you've actually got a little bit of better depth than you've had in previous seasons, but on the 3-point shots that Crieghton allows, teams are shooting well above 33% for the outside the top 200 there, and then you've got Jason Edwards and Jalen Sellers on the side of Providence. These two guys combine for 33 points per contest. Between the two of them, they shoot about 38% from three-point range, and in a nip and tuck spot, each of your top 3 scorers for Providence and 5 out of your top 6, excluding really Jameer Jones, they all shoot at least 78.5% at the free throw line, so they do a good job in that little bit of a pressure ordeal. You've been able to have Stephon Fox really step up, shoot 35% from 3, 14 points per game, and even though this team has been rough with their defense, you still have Osman, can't pronounce the last name, give you 2.5 blocks, 7 rebounds per game, so I do think that with this Providence team, even though they've had a little bit of a tough time on the defensive glass, you've got a Crieghton team that isn't the best in terms of giving themselves second and third chances, and this is a Providence team that is going to be pushed down low, and they're a top 65 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. Think that that's enough to get it done. So Providence is a 2-point favorite, so whether that be as a money line underdog or laying a point, I'm in on Providence and like the over. So I total 166, 883, 884. It's Toledo on the road against Kent State. Kent State does find themselves as a favorite of 4 to 4.5 points. 170.5 to 171.5 is the total. I know it's a dangerous game here, but I'm going to take a shot on the under. You do have a Kent State team that is absolutely playing at warp speed, 13th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Toledo, not as fast as typical, 131st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Still fast, don't get me wrong, but it's not like this is the same offense that we've seen in past seasons, as this is a Toledo team that's now more around about 89th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. One thing that Toledo team has been able to do a good job of is generating turnovers, and that's actually something that Kent State used to do a good job of, but this season for Kent State, not quite the same, about 197th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So if you get them in a home environment, they're a top 130 team. Toledo, they're 78th in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Away from home, that actually ascends into the top 45, so they've been a little bit better there, but they're outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and this Kent State team, they've been able to shoot about 40.8% from 3-point range. The big X factor is the man that was injured for them last season, as you had Morgan Safford out for much of the year last year. He's returned, and he's been tremendous. 14.5 points, 5.5 boards. He shoots about 39% from 3-point range, and Delrecco Gillespie is going to be able to own things down low. 19.5 points, 12.6 rebounds per game for a Kent State team that is a top 100 team in terms of rebound percentage. Now, Kent State, they themselves are outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, so a little bit less than savory there. But for the Toledo team, they're not necessarily a team that's going to be able to do a great job in terms of their low post play. They're outside the top 150 in terms of their rebound percentage. You've been able to get a little bit of something here. 8 rebounds out of Sean Craig, 13 points per contest, and he does shoot about 32% from 3. Main 3-point shooter is Leroy Blyden Jr., 40.5% 3-point shooter, 15.5 points per game, and then Sonny Wilson chips in there 17.5 points, 3.5 boards, 4.5 assists. He's been able to shoot about 38.5% from 3, but again, with this Toledo team outside the top 100 with their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, they're good when they get to the free throw line. They're a top 20 team shooting about 78% of the free throw line, and they do keep their opponents off the free throw lines. Kent State, a team that shoots 75% of the free throw line, they're not going to get a lot of opportunities there, but I think that Gillespie is going to be able to own this game. I do think that you get just enough turnovers for the under as well. I set my total at a 167.5, so like the under, and with Kent State, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 7 with them, 885, 886. You've got Baylor on the road against Kansas, and Kansas does find themselves as a favorite here of 6.5 to 7.5 points. 155.5 is the total. I'm at a total of 148.5. I do like the under. This Kansas team has been absolutely tremendous in terms of their defense. 13th in the country in terms of fewest points allowed on a per possession basis, specifically in their home games. It's a Kansas team that isn't necessarily playing as fast as they have in past seasons. In terms of total possessions per game, this team is currently clocking at about 214th in all of college basketball, while Baylor's 113th in terms of total possessions per game. We have seen a massive slowdown for them. For Baylor, in their last, we're going to call it about 4 games ever since conference plays began, they've been playing at a rate of about 6 to 7 possessions per game fewer. Now, you still have Cameron Carr driving things, 20.5 points, 5 rebounds. He shoots 42% from 3, and want to talk about disappointment. You've had 4 games out of James Nandri, and right now he's averaging 2.5 points and 4 rebounds per game. I recognize that you can't expect a guy mid-season to be a complete dominator, but for the former number 31 pick overall in the draft, not great to say the least, and this has been a Baylor team that has honestly been the most magnificent on defense, not going to lie to you, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis right now. They check in about 150th in all of college basketball, but one thing that I think is going to be able to keep them lively in this game, this Baylor team is tremendous at grabbing second and third chances. 39.9% of their missed shots become an offensive rebound in a road/score venue. That goes up to 48%, and that is actually numero uno in all of college basketball. Tonde Yusufu has been able to do a nice job with his overall versatility, supplying 18 points, 6 assists, 2 steals per contest. And on the flip side for Kansas, you do have a little bit of a fear of a letdown after that massive win over Iowa State, and there's no doubt about it. This is a Kansas team that's a little bit better on offense now that you've got Darren Peterson back, as Peterson in the 8 games that he's played, 21.5 points, 5 boards, pair of assists, shoots 40% from 3, and Trey White actually shoots about 45% from 3 himself, 15.5 points per game, and Kansas is really good on defense despite not generating any turnovers. So outside the top 335 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they just don't give up clean looks, but there's also a Kansas team that on the inside, they're outside the top 135 in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage, and while this Baylor team has been incredible in terms of grabbing second and third chances, Kansas has not been. Now, they're really good with their interior defense with Flory Badunga, give you overall about 8 rebounds, pair of blocks per contest. He's been great there. Melvin Council has good versatility, but for Kansas, 220th in terms of offensive rebound percentage. I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a defense-oriented game. In the end, I do think that Kansas pulls it out, but I do think that Baylor, with getting that road win against Oklahoma State, starting to figure it out. I set my line at 6.5, so at 7+, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Baylor, and I like the under. Semi-total at a 148.5, 887, 888 on the card. It is Marquette. They are going to be on the road against DePaul, and DePaul is a favorite of 3.5 points total on this game. It is 142.5, and with DePaul, so the best 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number for Marquette. This has just been a no good, very bad, terrible year, and their perimeter play for a team that's built around guards is just not good. 319th in their own 3-point shooting percentage at 30.1%. Opponents' 3-point shooting percentage checks in at 261st in a roadside-score venue when they're away from home. Teams shoot 36.3% from 3-point range, and you've got a DePaul team that is very pedestrian with their offense, 212th in terms of points per possession, but they have tallied at least 76 points in 6 out of their last 8 games, and you do have a Marquette team that's looking to play fast, 63rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. On the side of Marquette, you've been able to have Chase Ross do a really nice job in terms of being Mr. Do-It-All, about 16 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, but shoots 27% from 3. Nigel James has actually shot well from 3 at 37%. Lone guy out of your top 6 scorers that shoots above 32.1% from the outside. Now, this Marquette team still a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but that very much goes down away from home, and Ben Gold has been able to give this team some second chances. Ben Gold right now, 6.5 boards, 8.5 points per game, but now you have Zayd Lowry on the fold, who is able to generate about a steal per contest as well. That leaves this team a little bit hampered, and for this Marquette team, if you do look at their offensive rebound percentage, overall it's about 155th in all of college basketball, while DePaul, they're not going to grab a lot of second and third chances. They're about 227th with this regard, but I do like what Landon Blocker has been able to bring to the table for this offense, an offense where you don't have a strength, but even though they're only 212th in points per possession, they don't necessarily have that one weakness either, as Blocker, 11.5 points, 3.5 assists, 1.8 steals per contest. CJ Gunn has gunned it with about 13.5 points per game. Your main 3-point shooters are Caleb Banks and RJ Smith. They combine for about 14.5 points per contest. Both shoot between 37 to 38% from 3-point range. Cruz McClure has been able to give you a little bit from the outside as well, and this is a DePaul team that they themselves have been able to do a pretty rock-solid job with their defense. Marquette is right now actually 165th overall in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. DePaul is 40th. They have been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of being able to generate some turnovers, top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per-possession basis. I think that DePaul does find a way to be able to get the job done in this ordeal. They've been very good with their interior defense, and with Marquette really not shooting it well from 3, I do think that this DePaul team going to be able to have some success here, and I do think that you get enough possessions here for the over, as I did my line of 5.5, so if you do have a game that's like 5 to 6 points with a minute remaining, you get those late game fouls, so in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 here with DePaul, 889, 890 on the card. Ohio is on the road against Ball State. Ball State is a home underdog here of 3.5 to 4.5 points, 145.5 is the total. I'm in on the under. I set my total at a 142, and I recognize that this is an Ohio team that has not been great with regards to their defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are 253rd, and it's a Ball State team that's just really getting nothing going whatsoever. 269th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but Ball State is a very slow and controlled team. Right now, they are 326th in total possessions per game, 317th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and this is a Ball State team that, in terms of their style of play, they're one of those teams that they love to gamble for turnovers, as this Ball State team, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, right now they check in 74th in all of college basketball. I will say, when they're at home, they have been much more effective with regards to this defense. They're actually a top 25 team in terms of turnovers per possession at home, but you do face off against an Ohio team that, while they're awful with their three-point shooting, they shoot 29.2% from three-point range. That's a bottom 40 mark in all of college basketball. They've been relatively okay in terms of the little things. They do turn the ball over about 12.5 times per game. If you look at them in conference play, that's gone up to about 12.8 turnovers per game, but they do a good job pile driving the ball inside. They're a top 60 team with regards to their two-point shooting percentage. Ball State outside the top 280 with that regard. For Ohio, they've been able to do an okay job as well in terms of just being able to have Jackson Paveleski just lead this offense. 17 points, 5 assists. He's shooting 37% from three-point range, and outside of A.J. Shelton, who shoots 36% from three, you really have nobody else that's fully healthy, as Jesse Burris is out with injury all season long, shooting above 31% from three-point range, but it feels like there's a little bit of positivity coming for this Ohio team. Ever since conference plays began, they've been shooting above 30% from three, which doesn't sound like much, but it's been a little bit of an improvement. You've had Javon Simmons, who's able to give you 13.5 points, 5 rebounds per game, and Ohio's one of those teams that they know that they're not shooting well for three-point range, and they've been looking to pound the ball inside a little bit more, and for this Ball State team, you just really don't have a lot down low, and that's where I think that they lose this game. For Ball State, you've had Amani Ziegler along Davion Hill, both give you 11.8 points per contest, and Ziegler is able to throw on their 4.8 rebounds per game, and problem is he's a guard, and he's right now leading the team in terms of rebounds. That's not great, to say the least. Devin Barnes, who comes over from Utah, a steal, 8.5 points per contest, but I am for this Ball State team, they're not really any better with their three-point shooting either. While Ohio has been less than savory, they have not been able to knock down threes all season. Ball State is right there with them, shooting 30.5% from three-point range, and they allow opponents to shoot over 37% from three-point range as well. Do think that Ohio is going to be able to find some good looks inside. I do think that there's going to be a few turnovers on the side of Ohio. I also think that this is going to be a slowed-down game with how slowly Ball State plays, but I just don't think that Ball State executes themselves on offense. So I did set a total of 142. I like the under, and for Ohio, I'm willing to lay it. I did set them as an 8-point favorite, 891, 892 on the card. It's Loyola Chicago on the road against Dayton, and Dayton, very sizable favorites here of 17.5 to 18.5 points. 142 to 142.5 is the total. I set a total of 146, so I'm going to be in on this total over. Now, Loyola Chicago is about 334th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and it's not been great for them, to say the least. This is a Loyola Chicago group that right now is 240th in the country in terms of points per possession, but they've been better recently. 68 plus points in 7 out of their last 11 games after they had that stretch to begin the season where they just could not put points up on the board, and now they get to go up against a Dayton team that is outside the top 260 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. You've got a Loyola Chicago bunch that they love to be able to take those threes as well. They're a top 50 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three. Now, they've been shooting a hair above 31% from three-point range in games involving D1 and non-D1 teams, but that said, they've been able to get quite a bit of a nice boost out of one of their main freshmen, as you've had Nick Anderson really be able to come alive for this team all season long. He hasn't necessarily been a guy that has been able to do a ton for them, but now he's been able to step up. Overall for the season, gives you 5 points per contest, but since they've given him minutes, it feels like the offense has been better. Justin Moore's giving you more, 12.5 points, only shoots about 30% for three, but Cade Dotson, he's been able to shoot 37% from three-point range. DeWolf Tavares, I do think that we see some positivity from him right now, shooting 31.5% from three-point range. Now, we haven't seen Dotson going through an injury. He was out in that game against George Mason, but without him in the fold, they still got past 75 points, so there's reason for optimism there, and they're going to have the best shot blocker in this game, Miles Rubin, who's been able to give you about 2.5 blocks, 6.5 rebounds per game. Loyola Chicago, at the beginning part of the year, they were getting completely lambasted on the glass, but you've got a Dayton team that they're not going to fight for second and third chances. They're outside the top 260 in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. It's a Dayton team that they're only shooting about 31% from three-point range at home. That's hovering right around about 275th to 300th in all of college basketball. They do have good versatility in Emil Latang. He's able to give you a block, 12.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, and Javon Bennett, 16.5 points per contest. It's a Loyola Chicago team that they struggle to generate turnovers. Loyola Chicago right now 351st in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and that has really been the hallmark of the Dayton team all season long. They've been able to do a good job with their active hands, fourth in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and it is a Loyola Chicago team that has been janky all season long in terms of their defense, but it just feels like they're doing a better job in terms of taking care of the ball overall for the season. They've been outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but I do think that they are going to be able to find some open looks against a Dayton team that just doesn't guard the three-point arc very well, and it does feel like Loyola Chicago is just starting to be able to live up to that potential that they had prior to the season after just such a disappointing start. I set my line at 14. I'm going to be willing to take the points here with Loyola Chicago, and I'm in on the over. I set my total at a 146 and wrap things up with 893, 894. Colorado State, they're on the road against Boise State. Boise State is a favorite of 5.5 points, 141.5 is the total, and I set my line at 3.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Not going to have a lot of scoring opportunities in this game. Out of 365 Division I teams, Colorado State 364th in terms of total possessions per game, but this team is a lightning rod from three-point range, fourth in the country with their three-point shooting percentage at 40.2%. Boise State 246th at 32.1%. Now, to the credit of Boise State, you're not going to be able to get offensive rebounds against them. 23.3% of opponents' missed shots become an offensive rebound. That is a mark that ranks 17th in all of college basketball, but also for this Boise State team, they haven't necessarily been the most cleanly with the ball. A Colorado State team that they themselves have had quite a few turnovers, 255th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, so they do turn the ball over a little bit to be able to get those clean looks from three-point range. Boise State, they've been about 211th, and it just feels like Dylan Andrews comes over from UCLA. Just has not been a great fit for this team, as he's only shooting about 29 to 30% from three-point range. He throws in there about 10.5 points, 3.5 assists per contest, and this just has been a team that's had to rely upon their big men, and Andrew Meadows, like a 6'6" combo player, 12.5 points, shoots 38% from three. Drew Fielder has good size, 5 boards, 13.5 points. He's able to shoot 36% from three-point range, but even with having your dominance be big men down low, it's a Boise State team that's outside the top 225 in terms of their own two-point shooting percentage. They're outside the top 200 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage as well, about a country average team in terms of guarding the three-point line, but this is not a Boise State team that's going to put you under duress whatsoever in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They are outside the top 275 in all of college basketball, and this is a Colorado State team that they are going to give you some open looks as well. They are very efficient on offense, top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They are, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, right now clocking in 284th in all of college basketball. Modicum better when they're away from home, but for Colorado State, even though they've been dealing with an injury to their top scorer Kyle Jorgensen, who was shooting 50% from three-point range, you still have good versatility with Evan Muniz, a 6'6" sort of do-it-all point forward, give you about 8.5 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists to be able to find your next 4 top scorers to be able to really launch from three-point range. Chase Butler, he shoots about 41% from 3, 7.5 points per contest. Kerry Booth, Josh Passarelli, and then Brandon Rechsteiner, all between 12.1 and 12.6 points per contest. All shoot at least 41.5% from 3. Booth has been able to give you about 7 rebounds per game. Colorado State not going to get a lot of second and third chances as well, outside the top 225 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but they're a top 40 team in terms of their two-point shooting percentage. They're an amazing three-point shooting team. I think that they remain lively against a Boise State team that's been just a little bit disjointed on offense. So I did set my line at 139.5, like the under, and I'm going to take 4+ here with Colorado State, and that wraps things up for the Friday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Big thanks to Curtis Rogers of 710 Seattle Sports for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter /XIMLion at GUnit_81. Keep them on the letters EM. They mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast, giving you picks and analysis on every single game every single day. So I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.